I am Claire Mitchell, Doctor of Laws and King's Counsel.
And I am Zoe Venditozzi, Doctor of Laws, teacher and writer.
On the 8th of March 2020, International Women's Day, we launched the Feminist Witches of Scotland campaign. The Witchcraft Act, in force between 1563 and 1736, saw thousands of people, mostly women, accused and executed as witches in Scotland, in the country's biggest and most brutal miscarriage of justice. Our campaign had three aims: to get a formal state apology for those accused of witchcraft, to obtain a pardon for all those convicted, and to get a national memorial to remember those involved in the Witchcraft Act.
On International Women's Day 2022, the first of our aims was realised when First Minister Nicola Sturgeon issued a formal state apology to those accused as witches. The first formal state apology ever. We are currently working with politicians to ensure there is legislation passed to pardon those accused as witches, to change their status from convicted witches to those who ought never to have been prosecuted. We continue our work to obtain a national monument so those who suffered will never be forgotten. Join us as we speak to the experts on the witchcraft trials, both here in Scotland and further abroad, as we explore the history of women in Scotland and continue the cultural conversation of what it means to be a woman.
Oh, hi Zoe.
Hello Claire.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. So we're together today. We're not normally together.
We are.
Yes, but for the purposes of doing a podcast, we're normally in two different locations, but today we couldn't find a second quiet location, so we're together in my hotel room. Don't get any funny ideas, guys. But Claire has decided that, in her infinite wisdom, that we are better doing a visual podcast. So this is what maybe the second one we've done that's a visual one.
So we started off with yesterday's rant. It's just called Bonus Rant, and it's episode 83. And that was pretty much because we accidentally published it as an episode.
But I think we did Anna Caig's one the episode before.
Oh, we did?
We did, yeah. So
online.
So the last 1.5, shall we say, 1 and a fraction. So this is the new gold standard of the Witches of Scotland podcast. So you have to look at our faces. Okay, and for that I can only apologise.
Can I just point out, though, we're usually going to be in two different places?
Yes.
If you imagine.
I mean, to be fair, I spent a lot of money on a restraining order, but it seems to be doing FA difference. But anyway, anywho. So today we are doing episode 84, and despite this quite standard start, this is a very serious one. I mean, they're all serious ones, but today's really is a serious one. Really interesting. And something that I think that you as listeners and viewers, listeners or viewers, I don't know, viewers, I don't really know. I don't know how you get this. Will probably want to do things, want to do actions to be involved. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. Enjoy is entirely the wrong word, but I think you will engage with this one.
Yeah.
But before we go on to our guest for today, we have got the usual. Claire, what's been going on around the world?
News.
Yes, Claire. So in the news, we've had a little chat about this in the Little Fraction podcast, but we thought that probably not everybody would listen to that one because it wasn't like a normal length podcast. And I think this is one of the most horrifying stories. And I don't understand how we are becoming more and more horrified. Like, surely there's a point where you stop and you just go, right, that's enough now. But it just seems to be the ante is raised again and again. So to give you an overview, when the Giselle Pellico case happened in France, she discovered that after a period of years of feeling unwell, inexplicably going to the doctor, getting nowhere with a diagnosis of why she was so tired and in pain and so on and so forth, she discovered that her husband had been drugging her and filming her while he raped her, and while he had, I think, another 50 men who he'd found in chat rooms who came to rape her as well.
And there were more men, but they still remain unknown to this day and are walking around. And the horror, I suppose, for France wasn't that they were some idealised type of hideous sexual predator who leaps out and pulls you into the bushes, but they were, fathers and family men and
doctors, plumbers,
every kind of job. And they were all men sort of like in a geographical local area. And the idea that you would think, well, if that was just that geographical local area, what if that was looked at all over the country? How many people would have got involved in something that horrific?
So as a result of that, CNN did a kind of a deep dive into it and discovered that far from being an isolated issue, probably unsurprising to anybody, is actually much more widespread. And what they found was something that's been referred to in the press as a rape academy, where in the month of February, I believe it was, there were 62 million hits. Now, I'm not going to get dragged into the defensive men that were like, well, it was 62 million hits, it wasn't 62 million men. If it was one man that hit it 62 million times, it's not okay. Because what happened on that site was that men got together in a group chat and basically shared the information that they had about how to drug their partners and how to then film it and share that information, or to charge other men to come and watch live and give them instructions for what to do while they were raping their partners.
Yeah. Can you actually imagine this? A commodification of rape. Like making money off people watching it, off selling it, off selling the drugs to drug. There's like people going, well, I'm not sure if I've given her enough drugs to knock her out. You're giving people drugs which, if they make them unconscious, could be killing them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just attempted murder, just for starters, before we get into anything else that's more sexual. And the absolute horror that this is happening to women. And I think there was one woman who talked really sadly about the fact that her partner in her own home.
That was the woman in England. Yeah, that was the woman in England who discovered that for a number of years her husband had been drugging her with their son's sleeping medication and was giving it to her with a final cup of tea that was a kind of a, oh, we've reached the end of the day and you've worked really hard and just relax now with your cup of tea before going to bed. And she said that she looked forward to that because he was doing a nice thing for her. And lo and behold, she drank that cup of tea. She was drugged. He raped her. He filmed her. Just, there can be no worse abuse of trust. It's so horrifying. It's like the pinnacle of capitalism and patriarchy put together, where women are just absolutely, like a domestic servant during the day and then a sex object at night. It's like that kind of, like the Madonna, the Madonna and whore just completely rolled into one. And of course, he's in control of that. She's not choosing that sexual side. She is absolutely a victim, and it's not stranger danger. It's not a man dragging you into bushes. We keep saying this when we're being told when Reform, for example, and the far right and actually the middle to right, those guys
register to vote and vote.
It was yesterday. It was the 20th. So, but remember to vote though. Like if you've registered, remember to vote. But sorry, Claire, that's very negative. But they keep saying, "Oh, we're all about women and girls. We're all about women and girls. We're all about women and girls." But these men are not all about women and girls. No. And I think we've now reached a point where we've been clear. It's not all men, but it absolutely is the responsibility of all men to now be saying to other men, "That's not cool. Like, why are you talking like that? That's no way to talk about your girlfriend," and to be alert. And I'm sure that lots of men would be saying to us, well, I've never heard anybody talking like that. But we do know that it is just, it's just banter. People need to be much more on their toes about this sort of thing.
What always strikes me is when somebody is found guilty of really, really serious offences. I'm thinking of the Sarah Everard case. And people go, yeah, we knew it was a wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, what'd you do about it?
Do something about it. You're the actual police.
Yeah. And I think it's too much to expect women to be policing this. Men have to be looking at other men and saying, right, well, we're not doing that. That's not acceptable. Whatever age. And it's just so horrifying that there's just so many men that's something that they want to do, that there's a desire in you. I mean, far be it for me to kink shame, but I think to make somebody drugged to fulfill your sexual desires, there's no world in which that can be acceptable.
Let's be absolutely clear. That is not consent.
Mm-hmm.
You are unaware that your life's being put at risk, and you're unaware that you've been drugged, and you have no capacity to consent.
I mean, just imagine, even aside from the abuse of trust, that there's images of you being raped. And one of the things that they did on this thing was like an eye check, where they pulled up the eyelid of their partner on camera to prove that she was asleep, she was unconscious. It's just fucking gross, man. Don't believe in the death penalty. However,
no.
Gross. Anyway, it did make us think about the fact that the law changed in the UK about marital rape, didn't it?
Yeah.
Recently.
What we've been talking about, what we talk about in the book as well, is that because we live in a patriarchy, rights are assumed for men. You know, men got the right to vote. First of all, it was posh rich men, then it was less posh men, then it was all men, then it was some women, you know, but the default for really everything we have in terms of rights is men first. For example, women have equal rights with men at the moment, but people are talking about removing those rights again. They're talking about removing the rights in relation to bodily autonomy. We already have the example of that in America with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. They are talking about removing the autonomy in relation to voting. I mean, how crazy is that world that we're in? But it's always about retaining the man's rights and eroding the women's rights. And that's why it's super, super important that we are political as possible. And by that, I mean politics with a small p. I don't mean we need to be out, trying to speak to people at number 10. Well, I'll say this once, I'll say it many times. The way that fascism, and that's what we're currently looking in the face of, the way that fascism is defeated is starting at ground level politics and persuading the people round you of the merits of what your argument is. So I'm talking about, being part of local clubs, after school clubs, just community things where you have a say and you have a part in what's going on. That is the way to start off. You don't need to, stand to be an MP or something like that.
But also do that. Like if you're, but it's just so tedious, the fact that we now are at a point in society where we just go, well, there's no point in doing that. Well, why not? Like, why are more people not getting involved? You can hear all those, I know I keep saying this, but that minority of empty vessels are making a lot of noise. And I do keep saying there are more of us, i.e. good and decent people, than there are of the grifters and the people with no morals that are bigoted. We really need to make ourselves heard here. I just think women were too used to just going, well, it's pointless.
Also, folk feel like, what else do I have to do?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
they're like, well, I've got a job.
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm trying to do everything. I'm trying to organise my life. I've tried to keep thin.
Yeah.
What else do women have to do?
Yeah. But there's a lot. But if we don't protect those things, then we're going to lose the things. Like there was that recent House of Lords discussion about decriminalisation of abortion that covered England and Wales, I think.
Yes.
Definitely doesn't cover Scotland. Does it cover Northern Ireland? That's separate as well, isn't it?
I don't know.
I think it's just England and Wales. But it's something that we really, really need to be on guard about, because we're still not in a position where that's treated as healthcare. Lots of other countries treat abortion as healthcare. We don't. It's still on the criminal books. The police have had recent guidance about using things like women's digital, research, using things like period apps, that sort of thing, to show if they've broken the laws on that about access to abortion. And just to be super clear, what happened in the Lords isn't about okaying late-term abortions. It's being spun that way by these anti-abortion people that are funded by America largely, that are working with the right wing. They are saying, oh, this is about killing full-term babies. It's not that at all. It's about women having access to things like at home, telephone consultations, just safe healthcare with much, much earlier stage abortions. The vast majority of abortions are performed in a very, very early stage of a pregnancy. We're not talking about getting rid of, murdering late stage viable babies. That's absolutely not what the talk is, despite the fact that we're hearing a lot of propaganda saying that's what it is. It's not. And that if we don't control our own healthcare, isn't that just one of the basics we need to have?
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to a good friend of the show, Gemma Clark. She's been on.
I think she's really great on TikTok and on Instagram. She's very up to date and up to speed with stuff that's happening, like things like buffer zones in Scotland, but also keeping an eye on how the law is evolving and what's going to be happening in Scotland too, but talking primarily about just as things change in the news. So that's the first thing we've got to talk about. The second thing we've got to talk about is the new misogyny bill that the Greens are talking about implementing.
Yes. You'll remember that on International Women's Day, we said that we supported bringing back the misogyny part of a criminal law. So sorry, I'm trying to think of a way to put it more easily. But
So in layman's terms.
So in layman's terms, if someone was to assault someone else and they did it because it was motivated by misogyny, then they would have an allegation of assault which had an aggravation of misogyny on it. And what that would allow, first of all, for numbers to be taken of how many crimes involve misogyny. And that is really, really important, because until you can point at things in society, you need to be able to say, well, here are the statistics on it. Here's, the numbers. Here's why we need to do stuff on it. And so I think it's a really, really great idea. The Greens have brought forward a misogyny bill. Now, I don't know whether or not that bill in and of itself is suggesting that misogyny ought to be a crime in and of itself, or an aggravation. So I'm going to look into that for the next episode.
Yeah. Can you predict what the response was when that was put on Instagram?
Are we going to have a bill for misandry? Are we going to have, what? Who's going to judge what it is?
It's exactly the same argument as All Lives Matter. It just completely misses the point of where power lies and what the history is. Yeah, purposely. What is the history of these power dynamics? We have to fight for people that have been treated badly because the dominant white male heteronormative status quo has been very amply looked after for a long time.
They've had thousands of years.
Get a fucking grip. Honestly, it's so boring.
Stand aside. It's time for the patriarchy. That's what I say.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Come on.
Anyway. Right. Okay. Serious business aside.
Yes.
Okay. Here's some up-to-date things. It's like news about us. So we are working very hard on making the tartan available to other, like the whole area of the world.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're working on that. So bear with. It's quite complicated.
I know we keep promising it, but we've actually made strides forward.
Yeah. And we're two people that don't really know anything about it. So we've had to bring on some help so that we can get closer to making that happen. That's the first thing. Second thing is that we keep talking about the merch, which is in my spare room. That's getting very close to getting sold. And that's T-shirts and tote bags and necklaces. So hopefully that's going to be in the next few weeks.
I cannot tell you, this sounds like an advert, but it's actually not. But I cannot tell you the number of people who have complimented me on my T-shirt. I was like, thanks.
They're just staring at your tits.
No, they're not.
They've got eyes. I can make that joke. Other people can't. Okay. So anyway, so that's going to be getting sold very soon. So just keep an eye out. If you're not already on the mailing list, you might want to stick yourself on the mailing list. Sure. So just go to witchesofscotland.com, add yourself to the mailing list, because we'll give pre-notice to the people on the mailing list. Just like a day.
And know that adding yourself to that mailing list not only allows you to get the information faster, but we're actually inviting you to become part of the clan of Witches of Scotland. So this is serious. People are like, are you joking, a clan? And we're like, no, we're actually serious. We can be a clan. A clan is a community, or a group of people who have common aims, who there is a social side to their community, and that they have their own tartan, their own coat of arms, and they're identifiable. That's us.
Yeah, but interestingly, this kind of goes back to the news again. I've really been noticing the rise in the States in particular and in Scotland. This never kind of goes away in Scotland, but it rising a bit more in Scotland, about the right wing using the word clan and using the idea of clans to back up. It's a massive racist dog whistle. It's like, oh, we're the clans. And what they mean by that is we are the filmic idea of what Scots were in a bizarre, romanticised, phony Braveheart construct, which is people of our colouring being Scots, real Scots. It's bullshit. So just the word clan, as we know, has already been...
Just in case you're listening, Zoe is very carefully putting the words real Scots.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
That works on that.
That doesn't work. Dripping with sarcasm, okay? I don't believe in a construct of real speech marks Scots. I think people that choose to come and live in Scotland, I'm quite happy for you to be Scottish. That's cool. I think that's the policy we have generally over the last few decades. But we are seeing increasingly the use of the word clans as if to sort of legitimise white supremacy.
I know.
We're not in any way agreeing with that whatsoever. And just clan just means a community. That's what we're using.
Yeah, and that's why we want to take that
part of what we want to do is we want to take it and say, this is our community, this is a community for good. And let me tell you, our community is a lot bigger than their community, as Zoe has already said.
Yeah.
We can come together and fight for the good things under the banner of Witches of Scotland. That's what we're doing.
Not actual fighting. Okay, right. So let me see if there's anything else that I've got in the news. Oh, yes, right. So events coming up. So we are going to be signing books at Rare Birds Books in Edinburgh. Is that Stockbridge?
Yes.
On the 26th of April. Like, it's not an event as such, but if you come along,
yeah,
you can, if you want to get your book signed.
We love Rare Birds.
Paperback.
It's such a good
It's
book
a women's
store.
It just sells books written by women, which is just, it saves a lot of faffing around. So that's I joke. So that's happening on the 26th of April. We've also got an event happening in Glasgow, and this is like a talk event that Waterstones have put on, and that's going to be in Hillhead Church. That's on the 15th of May. We'll put more info about that in the next couple of days, so you can get tickets for it.
Looking forward to
that'll be fun.
An event in a church.
Yes, yeah, they do. They tend to go quite well. And can we just say that if you are involved with the festival, or if there's a festival in your town or near you, and you think that we'd be a good fit for that, get in touch with us. It's witchesofscotland@gmail.com and let us know. Or if there's a bookshop where you live and you think, yeah, we could get together a group of people there that would be interested in an event and us coming and talking about it, we'd absolutely love to do that. So for the remainder of April, we're still Waterstones Scottish Book of the Month.
Yay.
They've been incredibly supportive, Waterstones.
They have.
So have lots of other indie bookshops. They're really getting behind it. We really, really appreciate it.
Blackwell's Book of the Year.
Yeah, that's true.
And we've done lots of signings for Portobello as well.
And Toppings, they've been really great as well.
Yeah.
So we're really, really, really glad of all that support, because it's booksellers that tell people about the book often.
Absolutely. And can I mention this, that if you buy the Book of the Month, the Scottish Book of the Month, where there is a cafe, you get a free cup of tea or coffee.
Yeah, that's quite nice.
Yeah, I like that.
That takes the edge off. So, okay. So I think now we introduce this is the portion we go, and now we're going to hand over to having no, we're not going to do that.
No, this is where we explain who the woman is that you've looked up.
It's only 84 episodes in, I still can't remember the running order. Okay, right. So that's all the news. Before we go to our guest today, the person that we're going to remember today is Isabel McKendley, which is interesting. I've never met somebody with McKendley as a surname.
But you often wonder, because it's done so, is it not onomatopoeically? Is that the right word?
No.
Phonetically.
Thank you.
It's done so phonetically, you wonder whether it's like McKendrick or
McKinley.
Yeah.
And it's just how they've written it down, and who knows what the level of literacy was. And it's one of the things that is extremely frustrating. Although they did a great job putting together the information for the Survey of Scottish Witchcraft, again and again and again, you find things where you've got a name and then very little information. And this case, the case of Isabel McKendley, is no different. So all I know about her from the Survey of Scottish Witchcraft is that there was, on the 7th of May 1662, a commission was agreed by the Privy Council to try her, and that on the 28th of July, so more than 2 months later, 1662, there was a commission to pronounce her to be executed, that she was to be killed for being a witch. There's no further information about what she might have said, if she gave a confession, what she exactly was accused of. But do you know what there is details of, Claire?
Let me guess. Are there details of all the men that were involved in the case?
All the men that were involved in the case. We've got all their names.
Was it a lot?
Scottish names, like Rollo stood out to me. There was quite a few there. I think it's maybe about 10 of them. I'm not going to read their names out, but they're all mentioned. But we've got hee-haw information about this poor woman, Isabel McKendley, who we know was sentenced to execution. We don't even know what date she was executed. We do know that she was from Auchterarder, which is in Perthshire. But that's it. That's all the information. Her name, the dates, and the location.
So just for those who are listening who aren't Scottish, hee-haw in the context of we have hee-haw information means we have no information.
No information.
I don't know how that came about, hee-haw.
I'll look it up for next time. But anyway, we remember today Isabel McKendley. Hello, we are absolutely delighted to have a journalist on today who's going to tell us about some things that she's experienced in her line of work. And I think I'm not going to bang on and explain what she does. So I think without any further ado, I'm going to welcome to our podcast, Sarah Newey. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Now, Sarah, you're joining us all the way from Bangkok, aren't you? So I think it would be helpful if you told us what your background is and why it is we've asked you to come on today.
Of course. So I am mainly the global health security correspondent for the Telegraph newspaper based out in Bangkok. I've been here for about 3 years and I cover the Asia Pacific in this topic area. So it's really broad. It's from infectious disease to development issues to a lot about women's health and rights. And so it was that kind of interest that led me to Papua New Guinea at the beginning of this year, where I was reporting on what academics call sorcery accusation related violence, but in like our common parlance, we'd call witch hunts or witch trials. And so I spent 10 days in the country traveling around meeting women affected, perpetrators, clergy, activists, safe house runners. That's a badly phrased term, but you know what I mean. All the people involved. Yeah. So yes, very happy to be here to talk about it.
So first of all, that's a huge remit that you've got, actually. That's an enormous part of the world to cover on your, I don't know if you would say beat, that's movies. But that's huge. And you know, from a feminist perspective, the idea that you're used to looking at issues that affect women is really interesting to us. But how did you become aware of the fact there were witch trials and witch hunts happening in Papua New Guinea?
I think it's one of those issues that kind of crept up on me. And actually, I first was trying to report on this way back in 2024, about a year after I first came here. I think I'd been reading around, as you do, and came across the subject. And the first time it just didn't really go anywhere. It's expensive to go and difficult logistically, which we then found when we tried a year later. I got in touch with different people. Our first trip was actually planned for November and we had to postpone because of election-related violence, but we finally made it in January. And it was just one of those subjects that when I first came across it, I just didn't realise that witch accusations still happen in such large numbers. And the kind of the specifics of what was happening in Papua New Guinea was very interesting to me. So I basically lobbied my editors until they let me go.
Good.
Can I ask, just before we start, about talking about the witchcraft accusations, is magic a real thing there? Do people believe magic exists? Or is sorcery just being used in this one specific way?
So this is the fascinating thing about Papua New Guinea that makes it both an incredibly interesting and also incredibly complicated place to work. It's a country of 10 million people, but they speak 840 different languages, predominantly live in rural areas dotted across a country that's twice the size of the UK. And the kind of belief systems and attitudes are really varied across the country. So in some places, it is to do with magic. It's to do with spells, and actually that's often associated with men, especially in the coastal areas. In other places, it's much more these kind of ideas of sorcery or spirits embodying your body. And that's more to do with women, potentially in parts of the highlands. But the fascinating thing about it is these beliefs and ideas can be really isolated because the country only recently really started being connected. And that's one of the things I think we should talk about is like social media migration, how ideas have been spreading across Papua New Guinea into places. In some places, sorcery and magic beliefs never existed before and it's really new. And it's actually in those places that we're seeing the most violence. It's almost like one expert described it to me as a community's not inoculated against these ideas and beliefs. And maybe in the past there were certain ways that people dealt with sorcery that now have been replaced by extremely violent responses. There was a massive report by a really amazing professor called Miranda Forsyth about September last year. And she was kind of her conclusions from spending a significant chunk of time specifically in the highlands was that this is getting more violent in lots of communities and also more sexual violence seeing more sexual violence. So I think Papua New Guinea is a fascinating place because you can't really say, oh, it's all linked to magic or, oh, it's all linked to this one particular belief system. It's so varied. And even the trends that we're seeing, which made it very hard to report on and me quite anxious when I was writing about it because we can't really make generalizations and say, everywhere it's getting worse, or everywhere it's getting better, or everywhere it's linked to explaining the unexplained, or everywhere it's linked to the fact that there's a lawlessness. Like all of these different factors are manifesting, coming together, and there are really lots of really local specifics that.
So it's not like in Scotland at the time of the witch trials where there was one overwhelming belief system, which was Protestant Christianity. So they're not, so just please excuse my ignorance. So I'm really shocked that there's so many people in Papua New Guinea and that it's so big and that there's so many languages. I don't think I had a concept of how big it actually is.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably from films. I think my concept of Papua New Guinea is really ignorant and it's a tiny wee place, you know, but obviously it's not. So were they affected by colonialism? Like, is this like in some places where white people arrived and then went, this is our belief system, and then it sort of merged with whatever the existing system was?
So Papua New Guinea was definitely affected by colonialism. Most recently, it only became independent in 1975 from Australia. And Australia still has a really big presence in the country. But I don't know if it's so much about, I don't think that's the strongest factor that's at play here. That's why it's manifesting and seeing. Like I know in other places, it's often people have gone in and said, oh, your belief is a witch belief and that's bad. And that's kind of caused its own train of problems. In Papua New Guinea, I think it's such a culturally rich country. I mean, it's honestly totally fascinating. It's impossible, or not impossible, very difficult to get around, absolutely beautiful, incredibly welcoming people, but also has loads of really chronic big issues around development, around the legal system, corruption, access to healthcare, access to education. So I think the roots of it are cultural in some places. I didn't get the sense that it was kind of a response to colonialism in the same way that you might have seen in other countries. But definitely Papua New Guinea as a country has been deeply affected by colonialism, and it's only 50 years old. It was 2025 last year in September that they celebrated their 50th anniversary. So it's a new country. So obviously that's had an impact.
So
Yeah.
one of the drivers in Scotland of witchcraft accusations, and Zoe and I have talked about this quite a lot, is the fact that people were able to have read to them, because a lot of people were still illiterate at the time, the confessions of witches. And that was because the printing press had made its way to Scotland, and King James himself was the King James Bible, having the Bible produced. So I'm fascinated by the idea that one of the things that's really catching hold in Papua New Guinea is a form of communication which allows the idea of witchcraft accusations to spread, because that seems very, very similar from a non-academic's perspective, from the outside looking in, that witchcraft accusations were put in these pamphlets and then people read them everywhere, and then everyone became kind of crazed at the idea of witchcraft. So can you tell us a wee bit about this sort of new way that information's spreading?
Of course. So I think in two ways there are similarities with the past, and that was one of the trends that kept coming up for me. Is in a way what's happening in Papua New Guinea today is just history repeating itself. And one of them is like the structural system of the country. So for instance, lack of education, lack of healthcare, lawlessness, poverty, a rising sense of discontent around seeing what other people's lives are like, and that their lives aren't, looking for explanations, looking for someone to blame when something goes wrong. But yes, on the other side, and the reason it's maybe spreading is to do with the share of information, and that comes from two places. One is just migration across the country. Although it's still very difficult to travel, I'm very reliant on air travel, which is expensive. It's only more recently that people have moved en masse to like big cities, and so one of the trends is that they're seeing people bring their ideas from one place to another, like physically bringing ideas into new places, and suddenly people are being accused where they wouldn't have been accused before by someone who maybe wasn't in that community before. The other factor that's at play is social media and the rise of the internet, and WhatsApp and Facebook are sort of the internet, and people, I'm in some WhatsApp groups and they're just playing, these big groups, constantly videos and comments spreading like wildfire. And one of the things that is spreading a lot is videos of the torture. So that's something that they've seen kind of in the last 5 to 10 years, but people are recording what's happening. So say in a community, someone gets accused of witchcraft and mob violence sort of takes hold. We spoke to a lot of women and some of the perpetrators as well who had been involved in this, but they're recording it on their smartphones and putting it in these mass WhatsApp groups or posting it on Facebook. And then other people see it. And especially in the communities, this is what someone was saying about a lack of inoculation almost against these ideas. In the places where they maybe didn't have systems where they dealt with witchcraft or sorcery related violence in the past, they're looking online and seeing these. I mean, I don't know if you want me to describe them, but it is like a modern day stake, a lot of them, like women who, and some men, but predominantly the videos I've seen, a woman who've been like completely naked. They're standing there tied, splayed open, tied to trees or branches. There are fires in front of them. Often they're on like just above a corrugated metal, kind of standing on a platform above the rest of the crowd, blindfolded. And people, the thing that kept coming up was that people would take metal bars or iron bars and put them into the fire and then use those to burn people all over their body. I mean,
my God, those poor people
are horrendous. And the thing that's happening is even sometimes people who are saying, this is horrendous, what are we doing? They're also, some of those people also sharing it online, because in Papua New Guinea as well, violence is very normalized. There's a lot of tribal violence. There's a lot of election-related violence. And so this, I mean, 65% of women in Papua New Guinea have experienced domestic violence. All of this is kind of coming in together and kind of normalizing this. But that means that when these are spreading online and people are hearing about a sorcery or dealing with a sorcery accusation violence claim for the first time, they're looking online, they're seeing these comments about how to root out the witch, how to get rid of the bad spirit, how to protect your community, and they're copycatting that. So a lot of the you see are really similar.
It's exactly the same as it's just the 21st century version of the News from Scotland pamphlet.
Yeah, we know that from our colleague Leo that works in various African countries, particularly he's based in Nigeria, that the use of social media is a really big part of it, that people do film things. But I think there it's a bit maybe a step further on in that he then uses social media as a way to leverage people to stop doing it. So he sort of publicly shames people using social media because politicians and police are maybe a bit more responsive to that public perception. But it sounds here like it's the way that it's spread. It's the communication method, isn't it?
There definitely is some of that, but I think it's kind of in its nascent early days, and people are still figuring out how to respond to this.
Are there any checks and balances for people accused?
Well, yes and no, right? Papua New Guinea, again, there are only roughly, the government says 6,000 police officers for a country of 10 million people. So the resources just aren't necessarily there. And I mean, some of the police, sure, some turn a blind eye, but some are also terrified because you can't, two police officers going into a mob violence situation, they're not going to be able to do very much. There was in 2022 this really landmark moment when the Glassman Act got passed. So in Papua New Guinea as well, not always, but sometimes it's witch doctors called Glassmen, or also prayer warriors. Certain, not all, and actually a lot of religious groups are doing a lot against witchcraft, but in the same way you can't make generalizations, there are also a lot that are kind of advocating for it and saying it's Satan, etc. So you have these prayer warriors or these Glassmen who are, or women who are witch doctors who can kind of go and verify when someone's been accused. And so what they did in 2022 was they passed this law that made that, criminalized that, so that they were basically saying if you're going along acting as a glassman, confirming that somebody is a witch, then you can't, like, we're going to prosecute you. And there have been some prosecutions, but not loads. I think it's like 134 that local media were saying as of the end of last year. And again, that's a reflection of the lack of legal resources and police resources. And there's a lot of other work going on, kind of small scale work, and that's some of what we're reporting on as well. One program that's been really positive in one community is actually working with the perpetrators and changing their mind and turning them into advocates to go around communities themselves and share their stories and say this is bad. But one of the complicating factors in PNG, because the legal system is not strong, there's this real culture of compensation and kind of village magistrates and village courts. And in many ways, this is the only way that anyone can get any sort of justice. But what critics say is these small courts where people will basically be like, oh, you attacked this woman or you raped this man or whatever, or woman probably, but or whatever the case is, or you stole from this person, you have to pay them compensation in money and maybe like livestock, and then kind of the matter is settled. And although that's better than nothing, maybe some people say that also exacerbates it, because it just means people kind of act with a sense of impunity where they feel like, oh, I can accuse this person of being a witch and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, or I can commit this horrible act of violence and I'll just have to pay them afterwards and it will all be fine. So there's but then again, some people we spoke to were really pro it because they were like, how else am I going to get any sense of justice? And some people we spoke to were really like, this is a horrendous system that just perpetrates or like allows people to act with impunity. I think it's a better way of putting it. So it's a complicated system, but again, it's just there's just not enough resources, really.
Is there any church involvement, and do the church try and stop witchcraft accusations?
Yeah, so the Catholic Church in particular, which is one of the biggest churches in Papua New Guinea, I mean, there's a lot of different denominations that have a presence in the country. They've been really strongly advocating against this for a long time. They run safe houses. I met some of the bishops, one of the bishops and many of the sisters who are involved in this and are helping to fund all sorts of programs. And they've been doing a lot of advocacy, and they're the ones through QUARRELSOME, which is the Catholic aid organisation, who are funding these projects to go and work with young men in particular, and kind of help them change their lives. Basically, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol that's also fueling this. But at the same time, there are other denominations who are maybe even pushing for it, or certainly not pushing against it, or kind of talking about Satan and how it's like a manifestation of Satan within somebody, etc. Papua New Guinea is quite a visual country. Like that's not quite the word I mean, but even when you're talking about religion with people, they're all quite visual, like in their, or literal, I think is the word I'm looking for, in their descriptions of what Satan looks like, or etc. etc. And I
was going to ask that. So in Scotland, the accusation of being a witch was very much that you were working for the devil. So it's not like a modern day interpretation of being a witch, about nature and that sort of thing. It was that the devil had taken you over and that he was trying to bring about the downfall of good Christian society. Is that the basis of accusations in Papua New Guinea, or does it vary?
Some of it. But honestly, I think the biggest... So I sat down with someone who accused, in the end it was 9 women who they tortured, 4 of whom died. And it was one of the conversations that I was most intrigued by, because I really wanted to understand why somebody does this, as well as obviously the women are so important, but what drives somebody to do this? And for him, and I heard this from people who had spoken to many more perpetrators, it was less, he didn't really mention religion or Satan. He talked much more about this kind of spiritual presence that was causing them ill within the community, and they wanted to root it out. And there was some often in Papua New Guinea, most of the time the accusations happen after somebody has died, and there's just not very good health education or access to healthcare, and there's increasing like sudden deaths, things like strokes or heart attacks that people just don't understand and maybe didn't exist so much more, non-communicable diseases in the past. And when those deaths happen, people are looking around for an explanation. And so someone told me before I went, they were like, in Papua New Guinea, if someone dies, the question isn't how they died, it's who killed them. And that came up over and over and over again. And that's what I noticed more in my conversations. It was really like an attempt to explain something that didn't make sense. People. And I think that's something that you've seen in the past as well, right? Like often witchcraft accusations happen when there are periods of instability or upheaval, or society is changing.
Yeah.
All of that's definitely happening in Papua New Guinea over the last few decades. So yeah, I think religion and religious beliefs come into it a bit. And there are some denominations who are not doing anything to stop this from happening. But it wasn't mentioned so much by the people who I spoke to on the ground. Yeah,
and it is. Sorry, we should say that you wrote a piece for the Telegraph on it, and we'll direct people to that online.
Yeah, it's really good, comprehensive.
It's an excellent report, and distressing, but I think necessary to read if you want to understand how things are working there or not.
And is it mostly women? Then you sort of mentioned that before, but is it mostly women that get accused, or?
Yes, I think the problem with Papua New Guinea as well is the data is incredibly patchy. But yes, definitely. Well, we spoke to 7 people who had been accused and had been tortured, and one of them was a man, and 6 of them were women. And I feel like that's kind of representative of the stories that I was hearing and the places that I was going, and the people who are running safe houses, etc., who I was interviewing. It definitely does happen to men, but it's happening, I think, more to women from anecdotal reports, yeah.
And is there a reason given for that? You know, is there a why is it women?
I think, as with so many areas in history, it's to do with people on the outskirts of society. I didn't meet any woman who was accused who had a big support network or lots of money. It was mostly people who were poorer, who didn't, maybe slightly on the edge of society, they're an easy target. We heard a few stories like secondhand where people had been accused and their brother or their husband or something had said, no, this is ridiculous. That's not how dare you? I'll come and attack you if you accuse my wife, type thing. Most of the people who we spoke to were marginalized. So I think it's to do with that and women's place within society and access to finance and resources and support networks, or maybe you're a single mum, or all these things that are coming into play in the same way that we've seen throughout history.
Yeah. And is it largely men that attack and torture the women, or do women get involved in that as well?
So women are very much involved in the rumors that spread at the beginning. So normally this happens as again, situations are unique, but normally the most common is someone dies, rumors are spreading around society, people are making accusations. Sometimes they're fueled by jealousy, sometimes by fear. Sometimes there's also things like maybe somebody's got a skin imperfection or a disability or something like that makes them a target and makes them seem different. And sometimes it is women who are spreading these whispers, but normally it seems to be more the men who are actually leading the charge in terms of committing the violence. And often it's these kind of rascal gangs or young men. There's an unemployment crisis, there's alcohol, drugs, often those things are interlinked as well, who are kind of leading the charge. So I haven't heard very many cases where the women were actually the ones, with the iron bar prodding the counterpart or the person who's been accused. But I have heard cases where it was women who were kind of sparking the initial.
Yeah.
Is there a financial benefit to the people that are making the accusations, or is it a power benefit? Are they just to make people scared of them, or to exhibit some power?
I think sometimes we had one story where a market seller had been giving, I think it was just betel nut, which you chew. It's like a stimulant which you chew and is really common in Papua New Guinea. And she'd been giving it to this little boy, young teenager boy. And at one time she was like, this is enough. I'm not giving you any more free stuff. Like, pay for it or you're not getting it. And then there was an accusation in the next community over. And one of the things that happens when it's really torture initially. Like, I don't think people are doing this to kill the people who are accused. They're doing it to try and get answers. So there was this torture going on, people trying to get answers. You hear the local word is sanguma in lots of the cases where people think that someone has taken the heart from the person who's died and that's how they've died, and give us the heart back, and like, we want to replace the heart and get that back into the person and then we can bring them back alive, or you've taken something, la la la. So they're trying to get answers, and that's why they're using torture. But amid that, they're asking who the accomplices are. So quite often women will name, or men, the people who are being accused and tortured will name other people just because they're in so much pain and they want it to stop.
Yeah.
And in a certain instance, this young boy had gone to this torture that was happening and said, blame this woman, she's guilty. And then sure enough, she was blamed and accused. So there's some jealousy and some financial element to it sometimes, but not always. It's one of those patchwork type situations. I'm sure it's in Scotland.
No, we hear you that when you're talking about these things, you're
it's so
examples, you can't generalize.
And you can generalize to a degree, like it's greed, it's fear, it's uncertainty, it's explaining the unexplained, it's people within society who are on the outskirts or who you're slightly jealous of. I mean, in the case where I was talking about the perpetrator, who's a guy called Kevin, who actually was a very nice man. He's completely reformed his life, but it was very surreal to sit there in this kind of small shack in quite dim light and discuss with him exactly what he did. And he was very open with us, but it was a conversation I won't forget for a long time. But did he believe
that the people that he was torturing had done wrong? Like, did he firmly believe that? Yeah.
At the time, so he's from one of these communities where witchcraft accusations weren't common. But the rumors were spreading, and he'd seen stuff online, so he thought, "Oh, this must be something that's happening." And now, oh no, we've got a sanguma, which is this word for sorcerer in pidgin language. We've got a sanguma in our community, and this wealthy businessman died really suddenly. And so people were looking for an explanation in this quite rural community in kind of the highlands of Papua New Guinea, in a province called Enga. And he heard these rumors, and everyone was starting to talk about it. And he said he truly believed that these people were sorcerers, and he truly believed that by torturing them, he could find out where they'd hidden this businessman's heart. But then obviously that didn't happen. 4 women died, 5 were deeply burnt. But it wasn't really until, that was in 2019, it wasn't really until 2023 when this advocacy program came to his community and slowly talked to him about it and changed his mind. It wasn't until then that he really realized, I think, the gravity of what he'd done. So, you know, it's always difficult. I mean, maybe it's easier for him to tell me that, yes, of course I believed it, than to say, oh, I was high and I saw an opportunity to do something that, you know, he's very used to violence. His group, he led this gang called the Disciples, and it's what they call a rascals gang, so effectively guns for hire, and they were hired by all sorts of people to do election violence, to get involved in tribal violence, etc. So it's not like he didn't, I mean, he had a difficult upbringing. His dad was a drug dealer, etc. Etc. That makes us sound like I'm dismissing it, but you know what I mean.
Like a difficult background.
From nowhere. But his comments to me, he was like, I really did believe it, and it wasn't until much later that I realized what I'd done, and that I did it for nothing. And now I go around and tell other people, like, don't do this, you'll ruin your life, you'll ruin other people's lives. So I think people do believe it, but I also think there are other trends going on at the same time.
Who's funding the advocacy groups then? So who's actually helping to make a change there?
So one of them is the Catholic Church. That's in the provinces we were in. So I spent most time in the Southern Highlands, where it's getting very much worse and they're struggling to get a handle on it. And in Enga, where it was really bad, and this advocacy program has made a fairly big difference, and they're seeing fewer cases reported. That's run by the Catholic diocese there, and they're also working. There's a safe house we didn't actually get to go in the end, but there's a safe house up in the Highlands called House of Hope. That's also run by actually a Swiss nun called Sister Lorena, who's a really interesting character. So they're doing a lot of the work in the Highlands. Then you've got individuals in other places who are just taking matters into their own hands. So in Port Moresby, which is the capital, which previously didn't see accusations, but it's also seeing ideas increasingly coming into the city. And we met someone called Josephine Dura, who, on a complete shoestring budget, she occasionally gets grants from people like UNDP, who also do a lot of work on this. She's got this kind of, it's really no more than a shack. Like, there's not electricity, there's not glass windows, there's no running water, but it has got a lovely like courtyard. It's very lush and green, and she takes in people, also victims of domestic violence. So there are kind of things going on, but there's not really a single. UNDP are trying, but there's not really a single coordinated.
UNDP stand for?
United Nations Development Programme. They're doing a lot of work in this in the country, but there's not necessarily a single countrywide programme. It's all quite localised. But yes, in Enga, I was really impressed by the advocacy programme that was happening by the Catholic Church. They've got like this incredibly committed group of volunteers who are basically slowly trying to go around and change one person's mind, pull them in, get them to take part in the advocacy and pass the message along.
It sounds similar to what Leo Igwe's Advocacy for Alleged Witches does. One of his aims is that about going into schools and teaching critical thinking, and, you know, trying to get young people to sort of think, right, does this seem reasonable, or is this bonkers? You wouldn't use the word bonkers, but that's what they're doing to try and sort of, you know, basically educate people and make them think about what they're doing instead of getting swept along. But is it poverty then a lot of the time that is driving it? So if there's like these rascal gangs and they're guns for hire, I'm guessing that that's young men who can't find decent employment and are getting involved in a lifestyle.
Exactly. So I think one of the things that's also going on is, in the last 50 years, there has been, I mean, Papua New Guinea is an incredibly beautiful, actually mostly very welcoming country, wonderful people, and it's really resource rich. Like, they have oil and natural gas and stuff. But the exploitation that's happened of that has really benefited only people at the very top or foreign entities. And so there's just the inequalities have grown. So actually the head of the United Nations Development Programme in the country was saying, poverty has always existed in Papua New Guinea. Poverty isn't new, but the type of poverty is new, and the inequalities are new, and being able to see how other people are living their life maybe is new. And also, the system shifted to be more financial, whereas maybe in the past you'd have relied more on like, I don't, basic trade, or like just the way that the society is working.
They've caught capitalism. Yeah.
But life hasn't changed for most people. I mean, someone else who called Serena, whose surname I've completely forgotten, but she's now with the Lowry Institute, and she used to work as an advisor to the Justice Department in Papua New Guinea. She's from Papua New Guinea. She was saying, in many ways, we're still an agrarian country reliant on subsistence farming, but the ecosystem has also changed so much, and people are, there's frustrations boiling over. Definitely unemployment is a big problem. Poverty is a big issue. But interestingly, what you were saying about education, one thing that also we spoke to a lot of health people in the healthcare system. We were also working on some other stories on health when we were there, but obviously this fits into it so much. Someone called Dr. Betty Crocker, who is based in Enga, the same province that Kevin is from, she was saying she really wants there to be open autopsies, because people consistently are saying they stole the heart. And she's like, let's show them that the heart was not stolen. It's still in their body. Like, this is the sort of stuff that we need. You need basic education about things like strokes and diabetes and heart attack, HIV, and all these things that can cause death. But also you need to show people that
must be part of the reason why in Scotland, and in other European nations where there was witch trials happening, that over time, as people got more scientific understanding, they were able to kind of go, oh, okay, right, well, that explains that. Then instead of there being weather witches, there's an understanding that this is how a storm works, and just things like that. So what you're saying about how the actual body works, if you don't understand that, it is magical, and you can understand why people would look at that. But then also at the same time, if the internet is there just as much as it is here, you can look at anything, I think
it's just like a representation. Serena was saying, this is the fact that witchcraft exists in Papua New Guinea is a failure of the state. It's a failure of the state to provide good education, to provide good healthcare, to provide jobs, to provide basic infrastructure that connects them. Although that's very hard because it's basically swamps or mountains. Like it's such a dramatic, picturesque but unforgiving landscape. But a lack of justice system, all of these things that create that environment where people are looking for easy answers and they see them online, and that makes more sense to them maybe. And it's easier to blame an individual for something. I mean, something's happened to all of us at some point in our life where we've wanted to blame a person rather than blame luck, right? Like it's not an unhuman thing to do, but it's just going to that completely extra extreme because of all these other factors that are coming in.
Now, I know that there'll be people that are watching this and listening to this that'll say, right, well, what can I do to get involved? We've got very, very caring listeners that are proactive, viewers now, I suppose, as well. So what can people do to help and get involved?
So there are safe houses that are happening and programs that are helping. It's slightly hard. Josephine Jura, who I think was one of the most impressive people I met, she works in Port Moresby, and she's the one who has this tiny safe house on a shoestring budget. I'd say get in touch with me or you to find out details, because she doesn't have a bank account, so we have to do it through a Western Union link. Sister Lorena and the House of Hope and the Catholic Church, their work, it would be easier to fund online, and they've got much more of a presence. And then there are groups like UNDP as well, but I imagine people want to more get involved in the kind of direct, smaller scale programs.
I think that's probably what people, when you think if you give money to a church, you just don't know where it's going. Part of it will be going to that, but part of it will be going to other things, whereas a direct approach.
I would imagine the woman that's running the safe house, just, to think, because we got involved with when Claire Thomas, the photojournalist, that's from an episode a few episodes ago rather. Losing the power of speech. She did a fundraising thing to provide mattresses for one of the witch camps in Ghana, and we had a lot of listeners that were like, right, this is something that I can just get involved with and I can help a little bit, because it's one thing having an interest in what happened here historically, but to know that it's happening today is really, it's very shocking for people, because I think a lot of people think, until they start, listening to our podcast and we disabuse them of this, but a lot of people think, well, that's the olden days. Why would you have that now? No. But I think it's what you said at the beginning. It's the same sort of things. People are scared, or they're grieving, or they're traumatized, or they're poor, or they're high, or, there are all these different triggers that are happening where humans then seek to explain, and they need a story. And it might be it's a religious story, or it might be a cultural story, but if that's what the belief system is at that time, that's how people will maybe act. It's horrifying. It's still going on.
Sorry, we always think that we are the epitome of learning and understanding, but centuries in the future, people look back at us and think, we didn't even know how to time travel or whatever. It's just a belief system that you have at the time. It's not to do with intelligence.
No, oh my goodness.
And that's why education can work, but it can only work if and when the belief system more broadly is able to change. Explaining to people the heart's still there doesn't mean anything, because the belief system will just provide an explanation for that. So, don't get me wrong, that might be a great way to persuade some people, but some people will be like, the cleverness of Satan. The physical heart looks like it's there, but the capacity to make the heart work was the thing that was stolen. It just, it can just shift.
That's why it's going to be various different things, isn't it? To break it down, there won't be a one size fits all.
And you know what people kept saying is, it's also just general development and the situation and people situation improving for people, so maybe they don't turn to their neighbor and say, you're the reason I've got bad luck. But I was so shocked. This figure that really I keep banging on to people about is that as we said, data is lacking, but there was a UN Commission report in 2023 that found that 20,000 people in 60 countries across the world were accused over the 10 years leading to 2019 of witchcraft or sorcery accusation related violence.
And that's all we know about. Because we know there's obviously communities where people go missing and then they're in the bush and they're eaten, or they're in the swamp or whatever. I think a lot of this is I don't want to bang on too much about this, but it's poverty. Like if people felt secure, if we weren't all chasing a lifestyle that we're being shown, but people had their basic needs met and were able to just live securely, we wouldn't have issues like this. I think a lot of it is capitalism. It's a capitalism issue, I think, because it's not the rich. The rich they're not getting accused, are they? Generally, I presume.
Generally not. There have been a few cases where politicians have been accused, especially that's more when it comes to the magic side with the men, which are more in the coastal communities, but the vast majority it's more happening in more isolated places. I mean, it is worth just stressing how hard it is to get around Papua New Guinea. I mean, we did a map for another story that we were doing on, we went with a float plane to a remote community which was helping to offer healthcare and access to education and trade, etc. And we did this graphic of a map that shows the country. And there's basically 3 areas where there are roads and they don't all connect together. The capital city, Port Moresby, is not connected by roads to any of the other major cities in the country. So, and people, there's people are telling me, so how long did it take you to get to the healthcare clinic? And they're like, we walked for 3 days. That is the way these beliefs and cracking down on them and knowing what's even happening in some of these communities is really tough. And then you can imagine therefore why social media has such power. But
it's so immediate.
It's the development system that until that changes, I'm not sure this is going to change. And so I think that's why supporting the safe houses who are actually trying to help women who are affected is important.
Well, Sarah, it's been really fascinating speaking to you. That must have been quite an experience for you to go there and you know, I'm sure you see all sorts of things in the line of work that you do, but to go there and to see people are doing these incredibly barbaric acts and speak to somebody, a perpetrator, like fascinating, but mind-blowing, I'm sure, at the same time.
It was one of the more interesting, one of the most interesting research trips I've done in a while. Yeah. But I mean, I was just lucky to go and speak to these people and hear their stories, whether it's or the perpetrator or the clergy doing work or the healthcare worker. Yeah, it was a remarkable trip. It's a remarkable country.
We'll put up a link to your article, which we've said already is a really good overview, and we'll clue people in even more, I think, with what you've written about. And we'll also try and think about how we can get money. I'm particularly interested in getting money to the Safe House. I think anything that's kind of direct action where women are going to be helped and to be safe, then I think if we can work that out. But Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it, although we wish we didn't have to have this conversation. It's really interesting speaking to you.
Oh, no, thank you for having me and for doing all of the work you do to keep people's awareness of what's happening in the world.
I just can't believe it's not just a historical thing. It's just, you know, it's crazy, isn't it? Really crazy.
That was a great guest for today. Really thought-provoking, actually incredibly upsetting to think that we're still at that stage, and that whenever there's sort of social flux, this is one of the things that people go to try and, I don't know, to get back power over themselves.
It's just a recurring motif.
Yeah.
Times are bad. People want to get control in their lives. People want to blame someone for things that go wrong. They look around, who can be the people that they blame? And for some reason, it's much easier psychologically, and it seems socially, to blame people who don't have any power.
Yeah.
Even though ostensibly, clearly, if they had power, they wouldn't be in the situation that they were in.
It's so awful. It's so weird the way that social media is involved with it as well. It's bizarre. But anyway, we need to work out how to be better humans, I think, generally. One thing we can do in the meantime is, as discussed, is give money. So if you watch our socials, we'll try and work out with Sarah a good way of doing that. So that, I mean, we'll donate as Witches of Scotland, as we did with the Ghana situation with the mattresses, and as we did with Leo Igwe for the educational things in Nigeria. So we'll chuck a bunch of money over there, but we have to work out how to do that. So when we worked it out, we'll get on to you. Okay? So that was today's show. Is there anything that you would like to say in closing remarks?
Yes, I would like to ask you a few questions about ravens.
Oh, for God's sake. Honestly, I'm just getting stereotyped about this. Just leave us alone, okay?
Okay, us. How many of there are you?
I refuse to give numbers.
See, every time
No comment.
See, every time that we're out and about, do you not say, hi guys, when you see any given raven?
Yeah, I'm magpies.
Are you doing that to give me the impression that you know those ravens when you don't?
No comment.
Are you just going to say no comment to all my questions in relation to ravens? Because I can move on to raccoons.
Definitely no comment. I'm not speaking to them at the moment, so let's not discuss that. It's a sore topic.
Can I tell you what Germans call raccoons?
Oh no, what?
If the real I Watched is to be believed.
Trashen mention.
That's close.
Right.
They're called washing bears.
Washing bears?
Because they're little paws, and they wash their food before they eat them to try and break down.
My heart is softening towards them again. I'll give them a phone. Right, okay. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
And we'll be back in touch very soon.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
If you'd like to learn more about the Witches of Scotland, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sign up for our mailing list at www.witchesofscotland.com to keep updated with the campaign. On that site, you'll be able to find how to link with us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.